This is Point of View, celebrating a world record-breaking 62 years of quality public affairs programs from the studios of WDEF News 12, Chattanooga. Along with News 12 anchor John Mercer, I'm Maurice Lewis with a point of view of the issues and the initiatives facing first-term Chattanooga Mayor Andy Berke. Mayor Berke, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
John, glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
You know, it was just about a year ago, one of the columnists for the Times Free Press wrote it in his column. Actually, he lit a match to the speculation. Andy Berke has this business-like approach. He's well-liked. People on the national level like him. He probably won't even finish out his first term. So we know how that's gone, and now here you are getting into your second term.
So I'm confused. You're saying the pundit was wrong? I can't believe that.
Well, I was going to ask you if you would send that person to buy your lottery tickets for you during your second term.
Well, listen, this is a great job, and doesn't mean every day is great, but you get a chance to walk around and tell people that you represent what I think is the greatest mid-sized city in America. When you mention Chattanooga and you go outside anywhere around here, people say, oh, I love that city. And so for me, you know, we know that there are struggles, we know that there are bad days, but we also have to look at the general direction of the city, and we see a lot of things going right.
Well, one of your initiatives that's drawing more fire and an outright revolt among some of the members of the City Council would be your widely touted Violence Reduction Initiative. It came in with a lot of fanfare, it raised a lot of hopes. A special prosecutor was involved. Morale has never been higher in the police department, but yet there are a lot of bumps in the road that seem to be distracting away from the intent of the initiative. What's happening?
Well, I think from my perspective, one of the most important things that we can do as a city is to make inroads against violence. We want people to be safe. Our numbers over the last couple of years have been relatively flat. In other words, they haven't really changed very much. We know around the country that we've seen huge spikes in violence, and unfortunately, many cities around us are seeing 30, 40, 50, 60, and plus % of gains in homicide, which is horrible. But what we have to do is we just have to do our job better. We have to work harder. But it is a difficult thing to make inroads against gang violence, but we become more focused. We know more about the people who are causing the problems, and we're more aggressive than ever on bringing them to justice.
Do you feel like this violence reduction initiative, it's better than doing nothing at all, and you feel like it's really making inroads in that way?
Well, there's always a question of what else is there. And so I think for me, there's a couple things for viewers to understand. Number one is what the Violence Reduction Initiative really means is we're going to get focused on the people who are driving the violence, not people who are just walking the streets, minding their own business, doing the work. Instead of being about full neighborhoods, we're going to learn more about the couple hundred people who drive violence, because there's about 100 shots per year where people get injured in our community by gunfire, so 100 times. Let's focus on those people who are doing that shooting rather than just everybody in a neighborhood. That's part one. Part two is there's this, I think, confusion that that's all we're doing. It's not. We're doing so many other things at the same time, and Chief Fletcher is working hard to make sure that the department is poised for success.
How do you deal with situations with sentences for criminals? I mean, obviously that's one thing that you may say this violence reduction initiative is working, but it's hard to keep people in jail, some of the bad guys, off the streets.
And that's something that we really can't do much about. And so part of what the Violence Reduction Initiative does is it says, we are going to pay special attention to you all the way through the process. And that means not just the arrests, but also the prosecution side. We've arrested, since we started this, over 260 people just through the Violence Reduction Initiative because of gang violence. But we also know that, unfortunately, too many of them don't see the follow-through in the criminal prosecution process. And so,
well, Mayor, that's part of the real problem that people are looking at. The police department seems to be doing its job. The arrests are happening. The information is coming in and they're acting upon it. Once they hit the door at the courthouse, things change. Even with the special prosecutor that you have here, nothing is happening. A lot of the same people who have multiple arrests are out on bail with 3 or 4 different counts against them, and they're still out here. And they wind up with a plea bargain or probation.
So we're trying to do a couple things, and first is we're trying to work with all the prosecution side to figure out how they can invoke their discretion.
Yeah, but you don't control that. How are you going to get them to work with you?
Well, we continue to have those discussions. That's one of the things we do. And second of all, we have to continue to try to get arrests on the people we know are driving violence that are more severe, so that we get higher punishment. Sometimes that's difficult, but we'll keep working on it.
Well, how's the city council been as far as the VRI? Have they been supportive, or has there been some backlash? How do you feel?
Well, I think there are moments where people get frustrated. I get frustrated. I'm sure you get frustrated. People in the community get frustrated. For example, 3 weeks ago we had a terrible week. People were very frustrated. Then the last 3 weeks have been, relatively quiet. But we also know there's going to be another flare-up, and so that's just what happens in cities. But we try to extend the time out, make sure that there's as few of those as possible, work as hard as we can to ensure that those don't happen. And so when we have a bad week, when we see a cycle coming, people get frustrated.
Well,
and I understand that.
John, poor and inaccurate information often drives the mood on the street and the public. And the unfortunate couple, the murder of this couple with their 5-year-old son in the house, part of the rumor mill that's working overtime in some parts of the city is that the young man may have been providing information to the police, and that this was a payback hit.
I know of nothing like that. That's never been something that the chief has ever said. We would have a different view of what was going on if that was the case. So to my understanding, there's no truth to that.
Well, where I'm leading to, if I may, please, where I'm leading to with that question, the police department depends on the community to be its eyes and ears. You want information. To use the word snitch is one thing, but to be an informant is another, and to just, if you see something, say something. One of the so-called imbalances that I think the public has a perception of is that the public is asked to pick up a phone and call about what they see that goes wrong, but rarely do you hear about police officers pointing the finger at a bad cop that's on the job. So the public says, you want us to do as you say, but you don't show us that you're leading the way.
Well, I know that that's the perception. I can tell you that if there's any person who defies that perception, it's Fred Fletcher. In fact, if you look right now at the record, Chief Fletcher has asked for probably more people to be post-decertified. In other words, to say you can't be a police officer anywhere in this state than any person in the history of our state. He is very severe when it comes to misconduct by police officers. Just last week, he violated what many people think of as a rule between police officers by calling out the Gatlinburg detective for saying that something wasn't right. Yeah. Chief Fletcher, a lot of police officers might hold back in that. Chief Fletcher said, no, that's wrong. This person severely injured someone in our community, and let's call it what it is. Chief Fletcher is no pushover for that. He understands that a bad cop reflects terribly on the other 480 plus people we have in our department, and so we need to make sure that we hold up the reputation of those by saying that if someone acts poorly, we're going to deal with that appropriately.
From the media standpoint, I've noticed that since Chief Fletcher has been in office, when bad things happen in Chattanooga, he takes it personally, and I know you do as well. Explain to the viewers maybe why that's important for someone to really care about obviously what's going on in their community, and not that other police chiefs haven't, but you can really see it in his face when something bad happens.
Listen, I feel terrible. He feels terrible. It's one of the hardest parts of my job is to understand. I get very emotional when things happen like that, and I get mad, I get sad, I get all those things that people expect. But I still got to go do my job, and I think that's, sometimes that means after something like it happens, I still got to make an important public works decision or an important decision about housing or whatever it is. But the second part is we also have to look at the long view, which is if we have something, there's a terrible incident in our community. Again, the instinct is let's throw everything up in the air and figure out what's going on. and it's proper to sit back and say, okay, are we doing the right things? What else can we be doing? Take measure, but you can't let your emotions run everything. You also got to have the head. And so Chief Fletcher is very emotional, as am I, but then we also know now we got to figure out what's the hard work that comes next.
Speaking of the hard work, how do you convince young people not to shoot each other? That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you get that?
And that's part of what the Violence Reduction Initiative is about. But if you think about this, John, it is so hard to do this. Much of what happens in our community is not like you see on TV. In fact, what happens is that it's almost always men, one young man feels disrespected, and his response to that is to pull a gun and shoot it at somebody else. And then that's a sign of disrespect, and the only proper response to getting shot at is to shoot back. And so you get these cycles that are very difficult to stop.
Well, from a psychological standpoint, or maybe that's not the correct word, you have a segment of our society that has set up their own rules, their own lifestyle, and the ability of you and other elected officials, and certainly not the clergy, you don't know their language. So in order to reach people who have skill sets in terms of distribution, security, in any number of other aspects, they probably are looking at an opportunity to set their own agenda.
Yes, well, I think that you've always got to be working towards that language and to make sure you communicate with people. One of the things that you do as part of the Violence Reduction Initiative is we just try to be honest and transparent with the people who are causing the violence, and that helps them because when people do something wrong, we try to arrest them, and so we're up front with them and say, here's what's going to happen. It's not just you, by the way. If you're part of a group and y'all murder somebody in our city, we're coming after everybody. And so you try to create some group accountability so that when somebody says, hey, they shot at us, let's go shoot back at them, hopefully there's somebody in the group that says, wait a minute, they're not just going to come back at you when you go shoot, they're also coming back at me. And again, to do that though, you have to have follow through, which is then you have to hold them accountable by arresting them, and you have to follow through with the prosecution side. And again, that's a difficult process.
We have John Mercer, who is the anchorman here on News 12. I'm Maurice Lewis, and our special guest with this new edition of Point of View is the Honorable Mayor of the City of Chattanooga, Andy Berke. We'll be right back in just a moment.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
Jimmy can't sing,
and Tommy can't dance.
so we're gonna put some ants in their pants. Aww.
Kids will spend 22 minutes watching us, the super duper party troopers, sing about ants in their pants.
Isn't that funny? Ants in their pants, they got ants in their pants, they've got ants in their pants.
Brushing for 2 minutes now can save your child from severe tooth pain later. 2 minutes, twice a day. They have the time.
Life's taught me a lot, and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
Pretty much a good day for me would be people leaving their hands off of me. I'm always called names. Everywhere that I go, there's always someone calling me names, calling me gay. I've been choked, thrown up against a wall, punched. Nobody's ever tried to help me.
Chattanooga Mayor Andy Berke is the special guest here on Point of View, along with News 12 anchorman John Mercer. John?
I have to ask you, Mayor Berke, and this is going to put you on the spot, so to speak. Are you going to run for governor?
Right now, I really enjoy doing my job. That's what's important to me, and those political decisions tend to take care of themselves somewhere down the line. That's several years off, and I think for me, what I spend every day doing is how do I make good decisions, how do I help people in Chattanooga, and that's my focus.
Well, I know you have been in the legislature, and now you're mayor of Chattanooga. Wouldn't that be the next logical step, or is that something that you have to talk with your family about, or hard to say?
I think it's hard to say. For me, I've really enjoyed being in public service. I try to do the best job that I can. I often tell people, when I was in the legislature, people would ask me about running for mayor, and I'd say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And I meant it. I wasn't just playing. I actually meant it when I said it until I changed my mind. And the reason was because I saw at that moment what the next mayor of Chattanooga could do, and I thought it was important, and that I felt like I had some ability to make those things happen. And so that taught me a lesson, which is you can't plan that far in the future. You kind of have to do the best that you can, and when decisions need to be made, you make the best decision you can at the time.
So not to paraphrase, but not ruling it out, but not saying you're going to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting because there are people that speculate for some of the kind of appointments that you've made in your administration. You're really keeping your bids open in the western part of the state and other places, that you're building strength there and recognition. But some of the unfinished work that you have to do here is that there is a new initiative that's happening that affects people that are in public housing. And it says you either need to get a job, or you need to be doing volunteer work, or you need to be in school or something like that. Talk a little bit about what's causing you to take that action.
Well, that's really the Housing Authority. So the Housing Authority has all kinds of federal mandates. They work with the Housing and Urban Development Program department to make sure that they're following the rules. And for me, I really haven't been as involved in that decision. Mostly that's being driven by the people.
But it affects your people.
It absolutely affects the people. What we want to do always is figure out how we can provide housing at a low cost to people, make sure that there's affordability, but also ensure that people have opportunity in our city.
John?
Let me ask you this. Last summer, obviously, we had a horrible incident happen here with a homegrown terrorist came in and killed 5 people here in Chattanooga. How has that affected your office, and how has that affected what we do here as far as fighting terror in Chattanooga? Because no one ever thought that would happen here.
I never thought that was going to happen, and particularly in my hometown, to see that happen was devastating. It did a couple of things. Number one is it really showed me a lot about the character of people of Chattanooga. I go around and I talk to young people, and I always say, everybody's going to have bad things happen to them in life. The question is how you respond to it. And what I saw in the city was incredible character from Chattanoogans. And so it's given me even more faith in the city I love. The second thing is that I've spent a lot more time with the military than I ever thought that I would, and have gotten to know so many people, really have many, many wonderful friends all around the country now who are serving us, and that's been really deepened my life, and also given me a greater understanding of the people who serve us and fight for our freedom. And then I'd say the final thing is we've really taken stock of how we protect ourselves from terrorism. Chief Fletcher has undergone a lot of review of things, but I will tell you that right now, all over the country, people are asking the Chattanooga Police Department for lessons learned from 7/16. Right. And it's incredible to see, because they saw our response, they saw Chief Fletcher's performance and things that were done by the incredible heroes at the Chattanooga Police Department, and they're asking, how can we make sure that the same thing happens in our city if it ever comes to it?
And one of the things that I think that was interesting and very humbling to watch is that people, when this happened, they didn't shy away. They went forward to try and save other lives. People who were in the military, police officers in harm's way themselves, but went out and said, this is our community, no one's not going to do this.
Yeah, so I'm getting goose pimples just any time that we start talking about this. These are my friends, these are coworkers. These are people I have lunch with, and they're heroes.
You know, many of your constituents are grappling with another problem, and it's day-to-day stuff. It's the bread and butter. Where is the supermarket, and what has the city done to encourage a major supermarket to come into the areas that are declared as so-called food deserts? Tell us a little bit about your initiatives, and what are your plans to fix this problem?
So one of the things we know is that there are places that people have a difficult time having access to healthy foods. When I was in the legislature, I sponsored the Food Desert Relief Act because I knew from constituents in East Chattanooga in particular that there was a real problem with access to healthy foods, things like fresh vegetables and fruits. So we've done a couple things. Number one is, we've tried to work and make sure the city is attractive to supermarkets. One of the best new supermarkets, I won't even say the brand because I'm not trying to play favorites here, but actually getting a supermarket at Shallowford was really big for us to serve the Eastdale and Dalewood communities. That was a terrific thing that
you've got a lot of uncovered territory here.
There's still uncovered territory. As we've met with people at some other locations, we've made them aware of what opportunities are available for us to work both on the infrastructure side, like supermarkets, particularly in these neighborhoods. Do you need nicer sidewalks? Is something that we control. Are there places that we can help you out? Made people aware of our small business grants to allow them to work there. So we want to continue to work with people to provide as much coverage as we can to the entire community.
It does seem that one of the unfortunate things that's really out of your control and out of a lot of people's controls, the cheap, bad food that's just horrible for you health-wise seems to be the most inexpensive food, and the good stuff, the grapes, the oranges, the apples, that's more expensive than buying junk food.
Well, John, first of all, I don't look down on anybody because
no, I'm not saying that. I eat junk food too.
I'm the first sinner at the pulpit, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
but what I do know is that it's very hard for people who even want to make the right choices, and so we want to give people access to the foods and try to push them towards living a healthier lifestyle. We live in the South. We love, and I'm talking me too, love fried foods. I love barbecue. When it gets hot, we don't like to go outside. But for us to achieve more as a city, employers look at things like healthcare outcomes. How much is insurance going to cost? Are my employees going to be out sick all the time? They're actually looking at those numbers, and we have to do things to make our city a healthier place.
One of the interesting things that I think the city of Chattanooga is doing, and I know some other cities are doing it, is that you're trying to teach people how to be parents. Now, this might seem to be outlandish, but parenting is not. There's no manual for it. And for some people, they are the third generation that did things this way. So you've got the same problems being repeated over and over and over again. And you guys are trying, from a legislative standpoint and your responsibilities, you're trying to change that.
Yeah, it's always a conundrum to say we're going to make people better parents, right? That doesn't happen. But what we can do is to give people basic skills, because most people, almost everybody I know, wants to be a great parent. But they didn't have the best role model. I remember a couple years ago when we were starting to think about what we wanted to do, I talked to this woman. She told me she was abused as a kid. She was pregnant with a child, and her older child, who was already born, was about 3 or 4, had discipline problems. And she said, how do I discipline my child without doing to him what my dad did to me, right? It's a tough question. Certainly as a parent, I don't feel qualified to help her with that. But what we can do is we can give them access to experts who can help. So the city started something called Baby University. It helps mothers and families who have young children, 0 to 2, and mostly who are pregnant, to get that child off to the right start and answer questions like, what do I do to discipline my kid? How do I help with my kid's asthma? Why should I be reading to my kid at night? And to break down the barriers that prevent people from being great
Important
parents.
basics, John.
Let me ask you about Volkswagen really quickly while we have you here. Obviously, there was the emission scandal that rocked the local plant here. Are we still on track to build the SUV as far as you know? Have they said that there's no change on that? And that's good news, obviously, for the local economy.
Yeah, so there's no change. And in fact, I've had many meetings over the last couple of months. We actually help with the construction because of our partnership with Volkswagen, and had a meeting about this yesterday. The plans are proceeding just as we expected. Of course, I pay attention to see if there's any construction issues, because that would indicate something else going on, and everything is going along at the same pace. So our anticipation is that the BSUV is fine. I'll say that for Volkswagen to recover, they've got to recover in the American market. They are at 2% of the market, and so they this is their place in North America for them to, or in United States. So for them to grow their share, they have to make more cars here. That's just the math. And that while they are having some difficulties in the long run, we think that puts us in a good position.
Do you ever feel like you've got an answer on what happened though with the emissions scandal or not?
Well, I know the answer that I have is they messed up, right? They just messed up.
And they didn't fess up.
And then they didn't fess up. And I think they should certainly pay the appropriate price for doing that. But my job is also to advocate for the couple thousand people who are out there who are working. And so I know that the company needs to deal with the price of their problems, but then I want to see cars getting made out there, I want to see people employed, and we want to see this big SUV come out.
You know, this has been really a great opportunity to have you here on the New Point of View, and John Mercer having you here.
Thank you.
Mayor, thank you so much. We didn't get a chance to pin you down in terms of who's going to win the election. You probably, I'm sure, have an opinion.
It's so close. We were so close to doing it.
Well, listen, Point of View is on. One of the things that you can do is tell your friends and neighbors about us, and also set your DVR. We are here because you ask us to be, and hopefully we are a better show for that. I'm Maurice Lewis on behalf of all the staff here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Closed captioning provided by the following.
Funding for this program is brought to you by Barnett & Company, specializing in tax-efficient strategies for the preservation and distribution of family wealth, offering continuous investment management with a focus on long-term strategies. Areas of service include investment, estate, education, and retirement planning. Barnett & Company, the power of compound returns over time. More information can be found on the web at barnettandcompany.com.
For over 70 years, Smokey Bear has asked you to use fire responsibly.
Fire is due to an unattended campfire. Go time.
Here's how you can stay on the front lines of preventing wildfires. Always watch your campfire before leaving. Drown it, stir it, drown it again, and feel that the fire is out cold.
Oh, bullseye!
And you won't need a visit from these guys.
Copy that.
You can be Smokey's wingman when enjoying nature and prevent wildfires. Visit SmokeyBear.com for more fire prevention tips.